So welcome in whichever of those groups you fall. It's fantastic to have space to come together like this. It's really, I've just spent the better part of the day on a board meeting, long board meeting call with my colleagues at the Performing Arts Alliance, which is the coalition of all of the different National Arts Service organizations around the country, and am just profoundly aware sort of in these moments how much these pre-existing networks and communities are really a lifeline for so many of us. So thank you for everything that you do every day in your work and as a community to keep this space vibrant for all of us. So to get us started off, I'm going to hand us off very quickly here to our wonderful co-facilitators, but just to give you a quick sort of sense of where we are and what these are about and what's coming context-wise. So we started off this initial series of these first few town halls in mid-March as everything was sort of breaking open, just to create some immediate kind of rapid response sort of space for the NET community to have a chance to come together and just start talking and sharing and being resources for each other around what is top of mind right now. I know particularly with the topic and prompt questions and thinking on the things that are scheduled for today, that there's a lot of probably tendency to sort of start thinking like way out into the future. And this is just me at the top of this reassuring us that we do not have to find all of these solutions today in an hour. Hannah and I are hard at work on the continuing series of these events that will be continuing to have really all through the spring and summer over the next 6 months, and are really kind of trying to think about this space as you know, sort of in a Boal inspired kind of rehearsing the revolution way, to really imagine how can we collectively together use the opportunity of this pause to be co-creating and imagining and dreaming that more equitable, humane, just on the other side of this that we want to all have ready to move into. So know that that is space we're going to welcome you into for many months beyond this, and that the kind of conversation that's happening today that we'll have together will continue to spark that and play out. So let go of any sort of feeling like, you know, it all has to get solved by the end of an hour. So with that, I'm going to hand you over to Claudia and Leah, who have very graciously agreed to take care of us here today. Go for it, folks.
Oh, I'm using my shortcut spacebar to unmute myself, and we begin with a land acknowledgement. Thank you to Adrian Wong, a Spiderweb show in Ontario, for this digital land acknowledgement. Since our activities are shared digitally to the internet, let's also take a moment to consider the legacy of colonization embedded with the technologies, structures, and the ways of thinking we use every day. We are using equipment and high-speed internet not available in many Indigenous communities. Even the technology that are central to much of the art that we make leaves significant carbon footprints, contributing to changing climates that disproportionately affect Indigenous peoples and marginalized peoples worldwide. I invite you to join me in acknowledging all of this, as well as our shared responsibility to make good of this time and for each other, and to consider our roles in reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship. And I also like to take a moment to acknowledge that I am speaking to you from the Bay Area, land of the Ohlone peoples. The people are still alive, and we are taking a moment to acknowledge all incarcerated people, both past and present. I'm going to pass the microphone on to my co-facilitator, and I didn't introduce myself, I should do that. I'm co-president of the board of the Network of Ensemble Theaters. My name is Claudia Alick. My gender pronouns are they, their, she, hers. And currently, all of my access needs are met, but if you see me pull a face, it's because I'm having a muscle twinge. I'm not reacting to anything anyone's saying. Other than that, all my access needs are met. And I'm gonna hand my microphone over to Leah.
Hi, everybody. My name is Leah Cooper. I am calling in from Minneapolis. I'm currently on land about 6 miles from the confluence of the Mississippi and Minnesota rivers, known as Bidote by the Dakota people. whose lands were stolen during the genocide and forced removal of their people and the Ojibwe people, people who still live here and work here and contribute here and struggle to maintain their sovereign nation status. I'm super happy to be here. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I think I'm turning it over to Hannah to talk about some logistics.
Yeah, and I just want to thank you, Leah and Claudia, both for facilitating today's conversation, and also thank you for offering that land acknowledgement, Claudia, and offer that if folks want to put their own in the chat, just to get a sense of where folks are, the land where they're currently positioned, that would be beautiful. We'd love to invite that now. I see folks popping in. Really wonderful. So I have the distinct honor and privilege of sharing a little bit of logistical information with you. I will hope to keep it short and sweet so we can move right into the sharing. I'm Hannah Fenlon. My pronouns are she, her, and I am serving as a producing and engagement consultant for NET these days. And I just want to remind us of a couple of things. First of all, there are now over 75 people on this call. How beautiful. So you may want to use that little gallery view up in the upper right of your screen, but speaker view might be helpful in this case, so you can make sure to focus on whomever is speaking at any given time. So you may want to switch around to that. We're going to ask folks, as we start to share in the town hall portion, we're going to ask folks to use the hand raise function. So for those of you who are looking at us on your laptop or on your desktop computer, if you click the participants button at the bottom of your screen, which allows you to see everybody who's in the call, you should also see a little button with a little blue hand or an option that says raise hand. So when you click that, it'll give up me on the host end, a little hand up in the top of your photo, so that then we can queue folks up and be nice and orderly and share space really beautifully as we get to the sharing portion. So you can try that now if you want. I also have the power to lower your hands when you're done speaking, so you don't have to worry too much about the management of that, but you can put your hand up and down. If you can't find the button, we'll also be looking for your visual, actual appendages moving and indicating that you want to speak. So feel free to use your physical body, but it's helpful as well if you can use the little hand raise button so we can keep folks lined up at the virtual mic, as it were. You should also feel free to share anything you're experiencing, anything you want to share, but don't want to verbalize. Any resources in the chat box, we're going to save the chat, and we've been in the practice of sharing through a report out email a lot of the really beautiful resources and offerings that folks are sharing through that chat box. So please do use that. And I just want to take a moment to make sure you all know that this call is being recorded. Claudia's going to talk a little bit about the recording piece, but ultimately we want to use this for archival purposes, and we also want to make sure that folks can access this video and the beautiful conversations that are happening on our town halls, even if their schedule prevents it. And actually, Claudia, you don't have to talk about this because I'm going to. If something comes up, if you mention something that feels like, ooh, that's a little uncomfortable or sticky, I don't really want that out on the internet in perpetuity, please email me after this call. Let me know. I will make sure it is excised from the video so that whatever blunder you have perceived yourself to have made can be removed from the record. Totally, absolutely cool. So please just do that if that comes up. And finally, we don't have a mechanism just yet for folks to create sort of a big contact list for this, mostly because there's a lot of ways for you all to connect as NET members, the Facebook group being one of them, and a lot of you already know each other. But we do want to make ourselves, Alicia and I, available if there's any matchmaking that wants to be done after this call. Hey, this person said this, never met them before, really want to be connected to them. We can sort of make that happen for you. So keeping this as informal in that regard as possible. And I believe that is all the logistical information I have to share. It is a total honor and a blessing to see all your wonderful faces in your various parts of the world. And I am going to pass it on over to Leah.
Thanks, Hannah. I'm just going to talk really quickly about our community agreements we'd like to invite you all into for our online gathering. Many of these are taken from Claudia Alick's Calling Up Digital Community Guidelines. I'm just going to go through them quickly. For those of you who've been on calls before, you've already heard them and or may be familiar with them from other places, but I do want to hit all of them. Firstly, make space, take space. If you're typically somebody who does a lot of the talking, maybe step back and let other folks speak. If you're typically somebody who hangs back, maybe be bold and step forward. Just generally being aware of equity and voices. Stories stay, lessons leave. This sounds kind of strange since we're recording, but we want to be aware of the fact that stories are hard to keep intact and properly credited and fully contextualized. And so as you go out into the world with all of the wisdom that you might gain here, if you would, please carry with you the lessons, your own wisdom, your own take, and try not to repeat other people's stories as your own or out of context. Honor productive silence. This is true in the digital realm as the real world, maybe more so. Sometimes there are awkward silences. We can just let them be sometimes, and they are okay, and productivity is still happening. Avoid crosstalk, if you would. You do have the chat option to share things, either privately or with everyone, but if you could avoid crosstalk in the verbal part of this, that would be much appreciated. We're going to invite you to try to be fully present and resist the urge to multitask and check your email and read Facebook and look at your phone. And I have trouble not looking at the birds outside my window, but if you could stay with us, we would be so grateful. Throw your iPad across the room. Is that what you're doing, Claudia? Yes, that. Try not to damage it. But anyway, try to be present. Please recognize we're all speaking in draft here. We're all speaking from our vulnerable places of figuring it out as we go, and let's honor that in each other. Care for your body as needed, and your spirit and your mind. If you need to get up and stretch, if you need to go to another room, please feel free. That's fine. You don't have to wait for permission. Do what you need for your body. Let's think about the importance of impact as well as intention, please. And lastly, keep breathing. And toward that end, I'm going to invite us all into just a moment of grounding, because we just threw a ton of information, bulleted lists at you, and we want to invite in your heart and your breath in this moment. So if you would, feel free to close your eyes if you're comfortable with that, or look away from the screen. And I just want to invite us to inhale and exhale together, something we don't get to do so much in this moment, but we can do it virtually. So if you would, I'm going to invite you to inhale on a count of 3 and hold for 3, and then exhale for 5. Are we ready? Okay. And inhale, 2, 3, and hold, 2, 3, and exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's do it one more time, and you can inhale and exhale as loud as you want, because you're all muted anyway. Let's inhale, 2, 3, and hold, 2, 3, and exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, if you would, just do whatever uninhibited movement you can to release whatever tension might be in your face and your neck and your jaw and your hands and your arms and your chest, whatever. Shake it out. And last of all, recognizing this really fun thing we did in the last call, which was to imagine how our face might express listening and welcoming and supporting on these tiny little square boxes, and put on your listening, welcoming face. And at the same time, if you're in gallery view, take in the beautiful listening, welcoming faces of everybody else. All right, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Claudia now.
Thank you.
Prompt.
Thank you so much, Leah. Also, if there's communication agreements, ours are never carved in stone. So if at some point while we're having this conversation, something important comes up, drop it in the chat. I do what I like to call a relaxed meeting style. You know how we have relaxed performances? We are living in a world where we are balancing home, healthcare, as well as doing our professional jobs from our house. So yeah, take care of yourselves and do what you gotta do. We recognize you are as present as you can be, and that's what's important. Your faces are gorgeous, and I kind of wish I could just have you tell me how you're doing as human beings, and we could spend 3 hours just talking about that. However, we've got a big, meaty conversation we'd like to have with you as a field. These questions have been sourced from the field. So from our previous town halls and conversations, these are some of the questions that have come up. We're going to start with the biggest, woolliest one. And I really appreciate Alicia giving us the gift of knowing that we don't have to come up with an answer for what we're going to need 2 years from now, or even a year from now. But we are really aware that for some of us, it's potentially 18 months out before we get some kind of a vaccine where we can share space safely. What does safely mean for us in this context today? We're not only just talking about how do we create theater safely, how do we gather again together safely in terms of germs and that kind of stuff, but I'd also love for us to bring in that second conversation that we as a field had only begun having, which was how do we create safe spaces for all of us? How do we make a theater space that isn't damaging or harming any of us? But the big question folks have asked are, moving forward, how do we present theater safely in shared physical space? And I'm going to copy paste that question and put it in the chat. Folks, please, I can't wait to hear your answers. Moving forward, how do we present theater safely in shared physical spaces?
I want to invite folks once again, as you are sort of moved to speak, we're watching for the little hand, the little hand raise. But we can also watch for your physical body too.
There's a part 2 to that question as well. So while you're cooking up your answers to the first half of the question, which was how do we present theater safely in shared physical spaces? The second part of that question is, to that end, if we are still readjusting to sharing content in virtual spaces, what is theater if it is not live, physically embodied with people in space together? I split them into 2 different questions though, because they feel like they're connected, but the first one is, it's a separate question. All right, Kate, please.
Hi, Kate Mura, she, her, from Portland, Oregon with Fuse Theater Ensemble. One of the things that we've been talking about is doing a lot more outdoor theater. A few years ago, we had a partnership with Mount Hood National Forest and did Midsummer Night's Dream in real time over the course of a weekend. And so one of the things we've been thinking about is, can we do more outdoor space, more outdoor spaces, and have it be immersive and interactive so that we and our audience can take up a lot of space and have enough space in between all of us.
I am loving the action in the chat. I want to invite, well, I'm going to speak aloud the resource that Tyga has just shared in the Zoom chat. I was just sent word of this future resource, a collaboration between the Harvard School of Public Health and ART. Very exciting. Sabrina.
So I was excited to read in my local paper that someone has just bought the old drive-in movie theater, and they are planning to do high school graduations via the drive-in movie theater, which makes me go, what could be done that way with everybody in their cars, but watching a shared thing, and there's sound built in so that people can hear those kinds of things in their cars for movies. So just thinking about adapting other experiences.
So Sabrina, and there's I don't know if you see the chat, but there's a question asking where you are, where you're located.
I'm in Western Massachusetts, and the movie theater, I believe, is in Northfield. And I think the article was in the Daily Hampshire Gazette, and I'll put the GazetteNet web address in the chat.
I'm just going to invite us to maybe reflect on that second half of the question as well, which is, what is theater if it is not live, if it is not physically embodied together? Rusty.
Hey there, Rusty Tennant, Portland, Oregon, Fuse Theater Ensemble as well. So we've been talking a lot about this in our local community artistic directors meetings, and it comes down to a really big question of what we can actually offer as to when people will be themselves, considering themselves safe. So whether or not we can offer a safe space, obviously we can't do that until we have a vaccine. And the numbers indicate that the larger, at least in the surveys that I've seen, that the greater percentage of our audiences agree that that is when they will feel comfortable convening in large numbers and confined spaces again. And that looks to be at least a year to a year and a half off. So until then, I think it's and I hearken back to our knowledge from the AIDS epidemic in terms of phrasing and phraseology and how much responsibility we will accept for the choices of our audiences to attend said productions, and the concepts of thinking about rather than offering them safety, offering them safer options. And the ability to wear masks while you're in an audience, obviously. Audience seating, hand sanitizer. These sorts of things are obviously being thrown around quite a bit right now. But also in the way that we talk about what we can do until there is a vaccine, we need to give ourselves permission to recognize that we are not superhuman, and that there is a responsibility on any audience member who's coming into our spaces and trying, to participate in society themselves. So, thank you.
I just want to call on Ben, who's got his hand raised.
Hi, Ben Yalom with Fool's Fury Theater. I'm in San Diego right now. I think, my basic guiding principle for doing theater my entire career has been that the need for theater, that liveness is absolutely essential for making theater and having a thriving theater ecology and a place for theater within our culture. So this is obviously bringing up some major questions for me. But we started thinking about some differences even 2 years ago at our Fury Factory. We had a convening, one session of the convenings that we do every year that was dedicated to the question of what does live mean at this date of time, because things are changing and much of our lives are spent in virtual space in one form or another. And so I think that there are a couple of components to what maybe we traditionally think of as live. One is sort of being physically in the same space. One is time related. So is what we're doing right now has a certain quality of liveness to it. It's not recorded. It's not, I can say something right now that you guys can respond to, so maybe somebody just did. Thank you, Sabrina. Yes, in the chat, right? So there's a degree of something that's temporal. There's physical presence, and there are, I'm sure, many other things. And I know many other people are already working on these questions. So I guess, without coming to any brilliant response, what I would say is that we should be thinking not only about what is theater if it isn't live, but also, what does live mean? And what capacities do we have to do things that nonetheless, even if it's seen through a screen or through a phone or some other way, nonetheless differentiate us from recorded media that people might, that is only a one-way transition, usually through a rectangular box. So I'll just put that out there as a proposition to think about.
This is Claudia, just lifting up a couple of the comments that are taking place in the chat. Marcella talked about hand washing stations in bathrooms. That was an exciting note. Some folks were talking about how they, again, we aren't scientists, so we can't say with any certainty, because most of the scientists can't say with any certainty about the exact transmissibility, transferability, all of that stuff. But some of us think maybe being outside, spread out, that they die faster. So that's good to hear. And in the conversation about safe, promising safe when we can't really promise, but trying to create safer, that we're not only just thinking about the audience, but to Joan Lipkin's point, we're also thinking of staff and tech.
There's so much happening in the chat. I want to invite Eric, who's had his hand raised for a little while, followed by, I think, Jordan.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Good. Okay. I'm Eric, coming from the East Bay area, Oakland, in California. I think there's so much really painful, intense things going on right now, and I don't want to demean those at all, and I want to really honor that. And at the same time, I'm trying to look at, like, how can we approach this with some fun and frivolity as well, without sort of lessening the seriousness, also finding ways to not be so serious. And so one of my proposals that I'm trying to get people on board with is that the government should issue everybody hoop skirts. That if we all were wearing hoop skirts, it's about 2 or 3 feet from your body, and then the other person 2 or 3 feet from their body. So it automatically sets up the 6-foot distance. And we don't have to think about it so much. And it raises everybody's fashion level just like that. And then there's all sorts of fun accessories you can add. So can we camp up our response to this crisis?
Thanks, Eric. While we're speaking of frivolity, can you just share a little bit about the 2 pieces of art behind you? I'm sorry, my curiosity is piqued.
Of course.
Jordan.
This one is a painting of a tree by my stepmom. She loved painting trees. See, this one is sisters put the stars in the sky. Let me see if I can. These 2 sisters putting all the starfish up in the sky and making the universe.
Beautiful. Thank you. Should we go to Jordan?
Sure. Hi, everybody. This is Jordan Rosin, pronouns he, him, calling from Blacksburg, Virginia, with the Ume group. Sort of to Ben's point, I wanted to speak to the liveness that can be accomplished through certain online platforms. We actually had our first rehearsal last night on Zoom for a playback event that we're going to be holding in 5 weeks. And it was really, really magical. There is, something I think important to recognize about sharing time with one another as much as sharing space, and how valuable that is. And through conversations like these, I've been on the last 3 of these NET town halls and just loved so much the land acknowledgements, the gestures of witnessing that we can create for one another, and feel that perhaps these are ways to access also if there is a spiritual component of liveness, that we can find. The form of playback theater has been really interesting to explore for the Ume group right now, in as much as it shines a light on reflecting each other's essence and really listening to the heart of someone else's experience. And so it's a shorter form than the 90-minute martial arts spectacles we are accustomed to and Buto dance, but it has created a really interesting sense of interactivity. So just to bring in a spiritual component as well, and then intentionality, as I think we've done in these NET town halls, feels worth acknowledging as we consider liveness in a digital space specifically.
Jordan, I wonder, for folks who don't know, can you just clarify a little what playback theater is?
Sure. Playback, I actually learned from Sayda, who's on this call at Del Arte, and have since become a member of the Playback North American, Playback International Associations. It's an improv form that involves the audience as storytellers, and a series of established forms by which a company of actors and musicians reflects the audience's stories.
Cool, thanks. I think next up is Patricia, followed by Tad. Patricia?
Hi, everyone. I'm Patricia Garza from Center Theater Group, which is not necessarily an ensemble, but we support devised and collaborative work. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, or she, her, hers. Thank you so much for this space. I was just going to post in the chat an article that just came out at the LA Times today about gamification in theater. And obviously there's a lot of technology that's attached to that in terms of the VR equipment that folks would need to order, or something that they could download on their phones. But I love this idea of hiring actors or an ensemble that could really work on making, to the earlier point about fun and fancy, and really trying to interact in a different realm. And this idea of how a lot of folks are really sucked into games right now through video games, and that's really popular, and how can we again adapt the form of theater and maybe make it something else. So anyway, I just wanted to share that offering. I'll post it in the chat.
Thank you. I'm looking to see who's next. I think Tad had their hand up, but not now.
Yeah, I mean, I can, I was just going to say that we had a recent cabaret event where we had different company members, different friends of the theater, that artists put together a short 2 to 3 minute piece. We edited that all together, live streamed it, and really the community aspect of it was in the live stream and the commenting, so that the artists that were involved plus anybody else who was watching was able to live comment on the event and on the focus of the event, which is basically kind of a fundraiser for the theater. So even though it wasn't it was a pre-recorded edited event, the live part was the commenting, and it really kind of played like a director's cut, by the time it was all done. So that was nice.
I'm really excited about this idea of live being a different thing. It's live according to time, live according to shared physical space. I'm also excited about some of the platforms we've heard mentioned, but I want to encourage us to think beyond Zoom. We've got Facebook Live, we've got Discord, we've got Twitch, we've got streaming platforms that you have yet to create. We've got the Northwest Art Streaming Hub. So there's a lot of different places folks are doing this work. Pratik, do you have a comment for us?
Yes, I'm outside, so it might be a little bit noisy, so I'm sorry for that. But I just wanted to kind of echo some of the things that have been mentioned. I've seen, Claudia, I've seen you, Deborah, and other people like thrice this week. And that's because of, Zoom and because of this situation. So there's a thing about accessibility that suddenly people, I'm able to have a lot of conversations with people that I always wanted to have conversations with. Or be involved in things that has suddenly become accessible to me very easily because of this whole situation. So I see that as a really great plus, which is something that we can take back from this, even when this situation is not there. The other thing that I wanted to speak about is this thing of this reciprocity of the relationship between the artist and or the actor and the audience, or I'm kind of trying to experiment with this one thing, which is like I'm playing an alter ego kind of guru character that asks people to ask him questions on things that they might be facing in their life with the COVID-19 situation. And then that becomes a way for me to create my videos that I put out on Facebook. So this is something that I'm just kind of experimenting with. But to receive like an email from somebody whom I don't know, who's out there and asks a question to me is a reciprocity which I've not experienced before, and I'm quite enjoying that. So just wanted to say that.
All right, so we've got Sayda on deck. Mark Seldes gave a really great comment in the chat. So if Mark wants to voice that, I invite them to. But we've got Sayda next.
So ready for me or ready for Mark? Hi, Mark.
Ready for you, Sayda, and then Mark can tap in.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone. This is my first time joining you on Zoom. I'm thinking about the virtual spaces, and I'm calling in from Blue Lake, California. I'm voice faculty at Del Arte International. And we are in the land of the Wiyot people here. so I'm thinking about the virtual spaces and what is theater then. I'm reflecting on this notion of live, what live means. And I so I think that we when we in America tend to rush to finding the answer, like what to do next. And part of me is reflecting on what it means to slow down and to not find the answer so quickly. So before COVID happened, there was already this question of theater, you know, in the medium, and how all these ways of communicating with others were available to us, and some people were already really making use of those. And as a theater maker who really believes that you can make theater with just your body and your voice, I was somebody that just, you know, observed from afar, from a distance, and admire what's happening. But so now I am wondering about what it means to return to what if we had to think about making theater and not thinking of the resources that we have available, like media. So for me, I work at Del Arte, and part of that this year is working with the Latinx community up in Humboldt. And as I look to completing that project, this is of no use to me. I don't want to, I can't assume the community I'm working with doesn't, this is not exciting. I mean, and they don't have access to a computer or Zoom so I'm really thinking of how do I move forward and not lean on my computer as the only thing. I think we've swapped so quickly to like a way of, and this is wonderful. I see so many names here and people I would not be seeing otherwise. But I guess I'm putting out there that I'm thinking about how to make use of this isolation and really think of return to my body, return to quiet, and really linger in this space of not doing much, rather than rushing to the next way that we can, because I think that the aspect of live that Ben brought up, what is live? Live is really, I'm going to think about that some more, because I think there's some truth. We are live here right now. But for me, I want to use this opportunity to think about what it means to return to some stillness, some quiet, and try to reach out to the Latinx community that I'm working with. Do I talk to them on the phone? Do I write letters to them? So that the computer is not the only way that I'm not going to surrender. I'm not going to become a puppet to this. I don't want to. So I'm kind of struggling and lingering in that space.
We have Eric and then Kai. Deeply excited to have a conversation about what we want the theater world to look like when we are able to share physical space. I'm interested in that conversation too. Eric.
Most of what I wanted to say, Sayda just said so beautifully. So I just wanted to, yes, I feel like this is an opportunity for a pause, and it's hard for me to pause. And so this is good time to work on that. But the other thing I wanted to just throw out is, in the academic community, I've been in contact with a lot of the theater and dance departments in California, and we're wrestling with this question of, yes, we're making this work to continue teaching our classes and figure out productions online, and we're really good at making things work, but how good do we want to be at this? Because there's always this sort of looming chopping block wanting to give less resources to the arts. And we just want to be careful about, as we come back, that the administration doesn't say, well, you did so well online, let's just keep doing that. You don't need to meet, you don't need facilities, you don't need all these resources. So we're trying to sort of walk that balance.
I just want to jump in before we go to Kai, who's next up, to pivot off of what Eric just said, to introduce another question we had, which is about equity and inequity and how some of these platforms not only actively exclude people, but, and it's not the first time that the systems we operate within actively exclude people. How can we take this moment in which we're discovering that there are folks who were never safe in our spaces and in our systems and our platforms to think about creating safer spaces, more inclusive spaces that are not bought into certain economic systems that exclude. And with that, I'll invite Kai, who's had their hand up for quite a while.
Oh goodness, well, just with that question you just posed, Leah, now I want to say a whole different thing. And so I have to like regroup myself here. I'm Kai, pronoun she, her, hers. And I work sort of in the borderlands between theater and dance. So we're often accustomed to looking at a problem and then tipping it slightly on an angle. And so the thing that's come up for us, I am the leader of a collaborative called Good Troublemakers here in Los Angeles. And what we've been thinking about is, well, rather than liveness, aliveness seems a bit more rich and important in this moment where people's physical well-being is also at risk. So we've been sort of looking at this in a couple of stages, that before we're thinking about how we create live performance experiences or events for an audience, how do we as a community focus on aliveness? And that has taken precedence for us in this moment. So we've actually shifted a lot of our focus and resources away from creating external programming and trying to figure out how we support our collaboratives so that when we are able to face outwardly again, we're still intact and able to do that. So that's taken a lot of forms. One of the things that we've been working on a lot is sort of our own version of a mutual aid network. So that has taken the form of sending each other meals, sending each other love notes, both written notes, and also I just had someone send me a video of them dancing with a song separately and asked me to play them at like together, but start them at different times and see what that created. And it's also led us to a lot of cross-field collaborations of working with people that are more comfortable in digital space, even in food delivery, and how can a performance be paired with food delivery, and really trying to look at this as an opportunity to both support each other internally and strengthen those bonds. So as we start to open back up, we feel really energized and excited to do that. In terms of thinking about as we open up, one of the first things that came up was, well, we're going to be pretty shy and nervous about physical intimacy again. So perhaps before we're even talking about how do we present things, how do we keep people safe, how do we acclimate people to being in a shared space again? What does that look like? What type of performance, I don't know, frameworks do we need to have in place so that as people are entering, their nervous systems are also readjusting to being around each other? So I feel like, yes, we have safety. Yes, we have how far away being together in physical space will be again, but also as that starts to become possible, how do we make rules and acclimate each other to that? So lots of questions, not a ton of answers for anyone here, but lots of experiments, I think, that are bubbling up for us.
Beautiful experiments. I'm seeing a lot in the chat about aliveness and somatic practice and goosebumps. I think Matthew Watkins was next and Sabrina after that. Matthew.
Can you hear me? No. Yes, you can hear me or no?
Oh, now we can.
Yes,
yes.
Okay. Okay, great, awesome, thank you. Oh man, there's so many great like threads of conversation here. So if I get my wires crossed, please be patient with me. Let's see, I wanted to respond to the idea of like sharing time together as being liveness. And I'm thinking, and also about like taking time to learn what this new reality means, because I was very much not interested in making work for many weeks after this quarantine started, and then the project just sort of like emerged organically. out of just waiting. It just sort of happened, and it kind of said, I need to do this. And it's actually involving most likely working with some performers in Russia online, which is not an opportunity that we would have had before because we couldn't afford to be in the same physical space with one another. And I think it would have been difficult to get people interested in funding a project that was online within our industry. So this whole thing, I mean, everything is changing, and I'm trying to be open to both the positive connections as well as the, you know, as well as acknowledging the things that I find painful in the adjustment. And then thinking a lot about liveness in the theater as we pursue this project. My practice has always involved technology, specifically digital technology. That's been a cornerstone of my practice for a really long time. And I think that my interest in digital technology and virtual environments is the relief that it throws physical environment and physical presence into by incorporating all of those things. You can see them in opposition to one another. And I think moving into the project that I'm working on now, it's actually a similar conceptual framework, only inverted, in that where I'm sort of thinking about, I've seen a lot of online plays where the actor is sitting and speaking into the camera. And I'm interested now in the ways in which the camera can move through a 3D environment, that person's actual physical space, as a way of sort of inverting the liveness and the virtual, and just using those things as a sort of conceptual dichotomy, and thinking of the camera as a prop in a physical world that the actor is in. And so that's one thing. And then the other thing, and stop me if I talk too long, but I've been watching Saturday Night Live, which I never did before. And I'm really interested because they're not live anymore. It's all pre-recorded. And what is the difference between, because I'm thinking about what's the difference between live television as it was practiced before the quarantine and live theater. And now Saturday Night Live is being done in their houses, but it's not live anymore. And I'm wondering if the difference between if we were to coin a concept of online theater, if it's actually a really subtle difference, if maybe it's just a conceptual relationship towards the audience, and thinking about Zoom, because obviously the Saturday Night Live audience is not allowed to be present in the Zoom chat or whatever it is. And so it does have this sort of one directional flow of information. And I could imagine even just a really subtle thing where the audience, even if they're not participating, where they're not speaking in a Zoom show, which I was in a Zoom show and I wasn't speaking, I wasn't able to turn my mic on as an audience member, but the conceptual idea that the audience was present on that chat is maybe subtly important, or maybe it's meaningless. I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing that out. So those are my thoughts.
Incredibly useful thoughts. And we will interrupt you if any of you go on too long, but I know y'all, you could go on, all y'all could go on for hours and we would just be sitting here listening. You're smart theater artists and we're creating the future together. Thank you. Your comment actually reminded me of, I saw Mildred and Steven Sapp somewhere in here. I lost him somehow, but I saw Mildred when I was watching Parable of the Sowers live. Well, it wasn't a live stream. It was a live broadcast. So previously recorded, but a scheduled broadcast. And we were all online at the same time, chatting in the YouTube, chatting in the Facebook live feed. And it gave me a weird ghost of a feeling of being in an audience with other people that I knew, which was interesting. Also just want to lift up, I don't know if we've lifted this up from the chat, letter theater, making theater by sending letters. That's exciting. Door-to-door delivery theater. I'm excited about that. Who's going to make that app? Do it. I'm going to invest immediately. I will be one of your users. Shout out for all of the folks talking about the additional national and international collaborations that they are now doing with this new paradigm, thinking in ways that they never would have thought of before. And a big shout out to Nick Sly's massive, beautiful paragraph that was a shout out for equity. If Nick wants to repeat it out loud to us, I won't be mad. It was super dope. Who else do we have on deck, my colleagues? I have not been tracking.
I think we have Sabrina next, who also just shouted, "Save the post office." Sabrina, say more.
Hi.
Well, I was just thinking, yeah, letter theater. We need it in so many ways. My name's Sabrina Mandell. I'm with Happenstance Theater. We're a small ensemble in Maryland. Just a couple, everybody is so delightful to listen to, and it's really nice to see you all out there going through the struggle together, remotely. A couple things that came up that I wanted to share. Chris Bays, who is a great clown teacher, is doing something called the Laughing Club, which I think he offers for free, but it's also, he's got like a pay what you can. I put a link in the chat. It was the first time I experienced on the Zoom platform, it was the closest I've come to experiencing the sensation of what clown does, which is really that sort of intimate, direct contact with others. So I highly recommend everybody doing it. It's a lot of laughing and a lot of crying. So yeah, and then the idea of the adaptation of live theater has been done before. I think if we look to like vaudeville, you know, they had to completely reinvent themselves for film and television. So we have models of especially physical forms that can adapt. So I think looking to the past is probably a helpful thing to do. Also, way past the idea of pageants, somebody mentioned it in the chat, but we've been thinking a lot about processions and serenading balcony, you know, from balconies or to apartment buildings, you know, that we can be together maybe, and then, you know, people can see us from afar. That's a really exciting idea. Our company does a lot of croquet in our shows. We have these slow motion croquet battles. And so we've been talking about an experiment of having a croquet game where everybody is, because you're on the periphery, so it's a little bit like theater in the round, but you're outside. So anyway, we've been talking about that and how that could then adapt into a theatrical performance where you have, you know, people distanced in small groups, not financially viable, but money shmoney. So yeah, so those are just things I wanted to share. Thanks.
Thanks, Sabrina. I think next up is Cariel. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing right.
Yeah, it's Cariel. Hi, I'm Cariel. I'm calling in from Western Massachusetts in rural area. So if you can't hear me, I'm sorry. My pronouns are she, her, and I come from what is still to this day and what has traditionally been Nipmuc land. I am thinking a lot, and this has come up a little bit in the chat, about how people process grief in different ways. And I don't think we should say what should and shouldn't people do, because I think everybody does differently, and there's room for all of it. Some people need to make work, some people need to breathe, and some people need to do both in the same hour. And all of that is good and healthy and real. And there's, I think that when we're making work and when we're thinking about the future, there's a dichotomy, or not even a dichotomy, a duality of what is the now and the future. And how are we taking care of like ourselves, our actors, our tech people, our present, while also looking into the future. And for me, I'm thinking about how we're relating to our community, because out here in rural areas, that's a really important thing. Like your community is sort of what actually, I think it's important everywhere, but it's especially important here because somehow like you're not getting your snow plowed if you're not, you know, also making sure that your neighbor is just as okay as you are. And I think one of the things that we're doing right now is a poetry project on the radio, where anybody, whoever they are, can call in and read a poem, whether they make it or somebody else makes it. It's called Love in the Time of Corona. And it's been aired all over Western Mass and also I think all over New England. And for us, that's invited conversation and just talking. And I feel like that's theater in its own way, is like just having a conversation with someone. And I really appreciate that moment right now. And just a little addendum to the thing earlier is I think the problem with this is one of the problems that we live in right now is that we're always told we have to do something. And whether that is react or whether that's not react or how to react. And I feel like right now it's really a moment to grieve and also reinvent and re-articulate our feelings about what we do and how we do it and who we're doing it with, which is sort of a re-articulation of what Nick said.
Y'all make my brain just so happy. I'm going to read Marcella's comment because Marcella jumped off the call but wanted to share. I have been sending collages as well as music dance playlists. These are not directly productive, but keep me connected to other artists' ensemble. Also, re-access and social equity. We are looking at going back to some of our old roots, and instead of busing young people to large-scale programming, we are looking at going into low-income housing areas and working in the parking lots with smaller groups like back in the 80s and 90s. Thanks, Net folks are beautiful, inspiring. Yes, they are, Marcella. I wanted to take a quick moment and share all of the other incredibly generative and beautiful prompts that I know we're not all going to have time to talk about in this conversation, but as has been discussed, we're having these conversations in a lot of different digital spaces and configurations. So the other questions that were on here were, how do we shore up our individual and collective reserves and resources for continued crises? Like, how do we not only respond to this crisis, but how do we make sure that we're ready to respond to the next one? Another question was, how do we support artists ethically and with generosity and love? And this question I think is a really logical one that we should be thinking about, which is, what are the expenses related to creating theater in this new normal that other ensembles are keeping in mind when planning a budget for the upcoming fiscal year as it relates to any programming that depends on public gathering? So those were three beautifully generative questions. Again, I'm acknowledging we probably don't have time to reflect on all of them, but if anyone wants to popcorn and respond to those, feel free, or continue this beautiful conversation. We have another seven minutes to keep talking. I'm not looking at the who can go next. So Leah or Hannah, if you can let me know who's raising their hand. Okay, great. I was going to say, I kind of want to hear Nick read this beautiful note that they made. So I'm looking for it. Nick, if you want to unmute yourself, if you're still with us and you want to read it as I look for it.
Yes, please.
Yeah. As also thinking about who we want to engage. Oh, hello, everybody. I'm Nick, calling from New Orleans. Pronouns are he, him. Really beautiful to see your faces. Also thinking about who we want to engage with specifically in this moment toward a future of less inequity, justice, and erasure, and what we want to say to and do with each other and why. A lot of different answers are emerging depending on where you live, social conditions, history, and much more. But what if this moment is about slowing down enough to do the important work of acknowledging racial justice, environmental crises, or any other things that this moment is shining light upon?
Seeing a lot of head nods and hand signals and thumbs up. Leah.
Oh, I was just going to say the same thing. Lots of head nods. I want to invite any comment on any of these threads. Personally, speaking about inequity, I'm curious if people have thoughts on specific strategies for the weird digital platforms and technologies that feel more inclusive.
I was not muted, so I just said something out loud. Anu dropped a beautiful comment. Anu, would it be all right if would you be willing to voice it out loud, or may I read it?
I could voice it.
Yes, please.
I had a couple of us started getting a little emotional, so I thought I could drop that in the mix.
Good. It's so good. Please.
I said, what's on my mind, COVID is revealing inequities that have been with us for a long time. many of us theater workers are deeply impacted, losing jobs, healthcare, don't qualify for unemployment as gig workers. A number of artists are also frontline workers doing delivery, food service, and other jobs to make ends meet. What are ways both playful and profound that we can tap into our organizing and community building skills as artists to grow deeper relationships with movement building work across all these sectors and different populations also impacted, so that we can galvanize the kinds of change we all deserve. And I don't know, I think a lot of times as an artist, like there are so many, like I just got denied for food stamps and I just got denied for unemployment. They really don't know what to do with me. And I know it's not me, it's like our economy is just grown in this way. It just doesn't know how to deal with like all of the ways in which we've had to kind of hustle and survive. And I'm finding it really profound to connect with people who don't necessarily identify as artists, but speak poetry, speak truth, are doing organizing in their communities on the ground. And like, for me to like throw my lot in with other people who are coming from communities that are like really hard hit, and to say we're together and we're, you know, we're part of a larger collective to really fight for the kinds of things we all deserve. And so it's just been, I don't know, I just feel like I've had a lot of pretense shaken from my mixed class background of like my poverty and like I have this degree, or like I perform for wealthy people, or I do, you know, so there are all these ways in which, I don't know, I just, there's a lot more I need to suss out, but it's just something about being a section of society that is impoverished and part of like this movement to change shit.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I kind of want to read what you said out loud 3 more times out loud. I might just do it for myself. I might make it a mini blog. I don't know, but inspired. And it was followed up by a comment from Heidi. Heidi, do you want to voice that out loud? Or I can read it. I thought it was useful to the conversation as well. Forgive me, I can't see.
Hi.
Oh,
Hi,
yay,
I'm back.
thank you.
Hi.
Yay.
Hi, everyone. Some beautiful faces out there. The connection, just to follow up everything, we can do this together and also hold space for that grief. So it can change within a minute. And that's what I've been sharing with my artists, because this is the most traumatizing experience of our lifetimes. And that compounded on the inequities and the traumatizing experiences that we face as others every day, I think gives us a renewed sense of just gratitude and being a part of our community and holding space for grief. So what does that say about our role in our own self-care? I think is a topic that I wanted to bring up from that comment. I didn't read it. I can quote it. What did I say? As creatives, we constantly build, reimagine, adapt, create, visualize, and inspire. We expect our own selves to create our way through one of the most trauma-inducing times in our lifetime. So what does that say about our will, our work ethic, our mental and physical health? And in that, I just, again, want to say that it's okay to change our minds every moment for what we need to do to move forward together as a community and as artists and leaders across the globe.
Thank you. I just want to lean into this idea that there's shared solidarity between artists and activists. And there's a local artist here named Ben Krywaz who calls artists soul workers. And I think we can lean into our ability to share our souls and our vulnerability and find mirrored vulnerability in people who are now seeing that our healths are intertwined with each other. I also want to call Kate, whose hand has been up. Kate Burrow.
Rusty just posted the link in the comments, but Anu, we've had a lot of artists in your exact situation in Portland, Oregon, And so fuse thought outside of our immediate ensemble to our community that's affected, and has created a quarantine project. And we're doing our first test run with it on May 1st. But what comes to my mind with all of us here is that if it's already going to be a successful way to get funds directly and relatively quickly to artists in need. And I feel like it's a model that can potentially be used globally with all of us if there's interest in that in the future.
Well, I feel like the words "in the future" are the perfect transition point to bring us to, alas, our closing from this conversation. Deeply moved by the thoughts and ideas and our amazing community of smart theater thinkers. We are creating what this new thing will be, and I am encouraged by hearing what we're thinking about as we're building this new thing and what we're being aware of. I also want to encourage you and invite you to send us more questions. Those big, deep dive, fundamental questions are super useful for all of us. I also want to encourage you to visit all of our digital spaces and keep dropping your events. Invite us. We're no longer limited by time and space, so I can actually attend a lot of your stuff now. It's a terrible reason, but it's an exciting new paradigm for me and access. We will be sharing chat notes. I'm going to hand the a metaphorical microphone off to, I don't see the box, but I'm going to throw it to my colleague Hannah to do any closing housekeeping conversations and to let you know what's up next for NET.
Yeah, and Alicia as well will be chiming in. Thank you folks so much. That was really powerful and moving, and just so much great information shared. And as Claudia said, you know, doing a cataloging of all of the ways that we're feeling and responding and all of the impulses that we're having in this moment is so beautiful as we think about how we want to transform in a time when we can be safe together again. So I'll say a couple of logistical things and then Alicia, let you close out. We will be following up. There's so much juicy, deep stuff in this conversation that our follow-up may take a little more time than usual, but we'll send a detailed and organized follow-up from this call by the end of this week to y'all, so you can be on the lookout for that. A reminder that if you have more to share, the sort of nature of hearing folks' voices has been really powerful. So if you'd like to dial into our little voicemail box that we've set up for this time, the phone number was in the follow-up email, it's on the website, etc. So you can dial in and leave a short voicemail around any of the prompts or anything you didn't get to share on this call. A reminder that if you're not in NET's Facebook group, which is somewhere over 3,500 members, please do join and engage in that conversation there. And then I'll also remind you of the NET events calendar, and I'll post that link here in the chat, but we've got an events calendar that Alicia and I are maintaining specifically for online events that are useful to ensemble theater practitioners, whether they're performances or workshops or classes, etc. And you can write us or use the form that we've got there on the site to contribute to that events calendar. Alicia, may I pass it off to you?
Absolutely. Only if you will let me thank you for your incredible work on this and the full series, as you do. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you also, Claudia and Leah, for your beautiful facilitation, particularly in a large group in a digital space. That is not always easy, so thank you for that. And yeah, I think the only thing I will just add is a reminder of what I said at the beginning, which is that this is ongoing. I feel like we've only just gotten at the very tip of what is an extraordinary mountain of knowledge and thinking and deep feeling around all of this. So I encourage all of you to keep sharing that out with each other and with us at NET. If there's any thoughts that have come to you either through this conversation or just in your lives, or that do as you go through the next few weeks, about where you feel like this conversation should be going for our community. Please share them. As I mentioned at the beginning, Hannah and I are working on a series of grouped events that will happen starting in May and going throughout the summer. Touching on one of the things that came up in this call, we're right now thinking about starting that journey from a place of grief, and many ways to be exploring that together. But many thoughts around that process, and would love to think of that as something that we can co-create with all of you. So please do share out any thoughts you have. Otherwise, thank you for taking time and making space in your day to be together like this. It really is, I think, so important in these moments that we share the resources that we do have with each other, and this community is a huge one. So take advantage of it, and thank you all.